Okay, this video is a book review. The name of the book is Deliberate Dumbing Down of America by Charlotte Iserbyt. This is a picture of her, Charlotte Iserbyt. I'm going to start out with some quotes by Bertrand Russell. He was sort of a famous, brilliant English aristocrat, but also kind of a jerk. And you'll see where this is coming from. That Bertrand Russell was recommending sort of, a free-thinking mind, individual spirit, curiosity, for himself, for aristocrats, but he did not want that for the common man. And he was one of the architects of the modern educational system. There were others, of course, and John Dewey, of course. Okay, but I'm just sharing this with you because most people don't know about this, and it helps one to understand where this all comes from and why. Okay, so these are quotes by Bertrand Russell. He lived from 1872 to 1970. He said, in comparison with the ancient Greeks, the Romans were stupid and brutal. And that's an important point. The ancient Greeks were like the beginning of Western culture in terms of the development of philosophy, and they were very open-minded. They would argue back and forth and allow all kinds of different opinions. That's a rare thing. Most countries since the beginning of time have been tyrannical, ruled by brutal dictators that just, kick the crap out of anybody who doesn't do what they're told and agree with them. Okay, so here's what Bertrand Russell says. The free intellect is the chief engine of human progress. The free intellect. That's an important statement there. Free intellect. Skepticism is the most effective stance humans can adopt with regard to any kind of knowledge. Yeah, to be intelligent, you have to begin by being skeptical. You don't just take things on word. You try to convince yourself, get, supportive evidence. These are all things we take for granted any intelligent person, but they are not part of the school system. Bertrand Russell continues, all the important human advances that we know of since historical times began have been due to individuals of whom the majority faced virulent public opposition. So that's another point. In order for a person to make a scientific or other type of discovery, they typically have to face tremendous hostile opposition. Okay, so that requires an individual or a society either that allows somebody to have a contradictory opinion or an individual that's very strong in holding to their opinion. Russell continues, something of the hermit's temper is an essential element in many forms of excellence, since it enables a man to resist the lure of popularity, to pursue important work in spite of general indifference or hostility, and to arrive at opinions which are opposed to prevalent errors. Teachers are more so than any other class of person the guardians of civilization. What they teach the younger generation determines a big part of the future. Russell continues, men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education. What is the difference between a bright, inquisitive 5-year-old and a dull, stupid 19-year-old? 14 years of the British educational system. There can be no agreement between those who regard education as a means of instilling certain definite beliefs and those who think that it should produce the power of independent judgment. Yeah, they're totally different. We are faced with the paradoxical fact that education has become one of the chief obstacles to intelligence and freedom of thought. We must have some concept of what kind of person we wish to produce before we can have any definite opinion of what type of education we consider best. Yeah, are you trying to produce a bunch of conformist clones who will just be obedient with no free will, or are you trying to produce individual people with a mind that can think for itself? Russell continues, almost all education has a power motive. It aims at strengthening some groups that are in competition with other groups. Its motive, therefore, in the main, is to determine what subjects are taught, what knowledge is offered, what knowledge is withheld, and to decide what mental habits of the pupils they will be expected to acquire. Hardly anything is done in modern education to foster the inward growth of mind and spirit. In fact, those people who have had the most education quite often are the most atrophied in their mental and spiritual life. A thought is not free if the profession of certain opinions makes it impossible to earn a living. Thought is not free if all the arguments on one side of a controversy are perpetually presented as attractively as possible, while the opposing arguments can only be discovered by a diligent serf. Gee, does that sound familiar in the modern world? Russell continues, when we pass in review of the opinions of former times, which are now recognized as absurd, it will be found in 9 times out of 10 that they were such to justify the infliction of suffering. Yeah, whatever one group says when it wants to bully another group is it says the other group is inferior or the other group is evil and therefore deserves to be treated harshly. I'm going through this Bertrand Russell stuff because it sets the stage for everything that's going to follow, and it's pretty much sets the stage for where education is at. This is Bertrand Russell continuing. Children will, as in Plato's Republic, be taken from their mothers and reared by professional nurses. He's recommending this, Bertrand Russell, and this is actually the direction that things are going. Gradually, by selective breeding, the congenital differences between the rulers and the ruled will increase until they become almost a different species. Fichte, by the way, was the developer of the Prussian school in Germany. Fichte laid it down that education should aim at destroying free will. That's a big statement right there. Education should aim at destroying free will, and Russell agrees with this. And the modern educational system is designed to do this, destroying free will, to produce people who are conformist, with no individual autonomy, so that after the pupils have left school, they will be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than their schoolmasters would have wished. They will be convinced that snow is black. Social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable conviction that snow is black. Various results will soon be arrived at. First, that the influence of the home is obstructive. Second, that not much can be done unless schooling indoctrination begins before the age of 10 years old. Third, that verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. And fourth, that the opinion that snow is white must be held to show a morbid taste for eccentricity. Yeah, anybody who thinks for themselves will, get treated harshly for it. Russell continues, it is for future scientists to make these maxims precise and to discover exactly how much it costs per head to make children believe that snow is black, and how much less it would cost to make them believe it is gray. I think the most important subject will be the psychology of groups. Gee, does that sound familiar? Russell continues, why is propaganda so much more successful when it stirs up hatred than when it stirs up a friendly feeling? Okay, that was all quotes from Bertrand Russell, the English architect, who was one of the architects of the modern school system, and whose thoughts as spoken here are a strong component of how the modern public school system was designed. Okay, now we're going to get to a few quotes by Charlotte Iserbyt. Here's the lady, here's her book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. She reviews the work of Bertrand Russell, and that sort of sets the stage for how the school system is run. And she just sort of inadvertently ended up in a real high position in education, and she figured out all the stuff that was going on, and she was amazed by it, and so she wrote this book. The whole public school system is designed to dumb down students so they are easier to control. This is Charlotte Iserbyt speaking. They want the students to only do things for rewards, not to do anything out of their own free choice or values. That makes them so much easier to control. So you get the point. If somebody is a Christian and does things based on what they think is right or wrong, they're much more difficult to control than somebody who only wants to be rewarded with a good grade or with money. Okay, Charlotte continues. The plan for education was to use mastery learning with Pavlov's Skinner type behavioral conditioning to destroy free will. Then she goes on, the history books have been rewritten to convince people of a modernist viewpoint. That is true. If you study history and you go back to original source documents from 1776, you will see that the subsequent later opinions, especially coming after 1920, are totally rewritten to change the story of what actually happened. She continues, the French Revolution was actually a communist revolution. The long-term goal of the modernist has for a long time been to merge the United States with Soviet Russia and to call it the North American Soviet Union. That is actually an interesting point. People forget how close the United States actually is to Soviet Russia if you go through Alaska. It's much closer than is usually thought. And the North American Union would be the combination of Canada, what is currently the USA, and Mexico. Some people claim that they've already started to merge the three countries. Okay, perhaps the four countries, okay? Consolidation and regionalization are euphemisms for centralization and communism, okay? It's always easier for a ruler to have everything centralized, and they can control everything much more easily. And then here's one of the biggest statements she makes. The computer makes it much easier to train students in this way, to brainwash them. The computer makes it much easier to train students and to brainwash them because there's no personal relationship. It's just the student alone with the computer, and the student doesn't even realize what's happening. They have to follow, the prompts and the questions in order to, get a passing grade in the class, and the computer is stepwise, progressively brainwashing them. There's no parent there, there's no teacher, there's no personal relationship. It's just the student being brainwashed by the computer. So Charlotte continues, there is no one in between the student and the computer, no person, no human relationship. Pretty soon all schools will be bookless. That's tradition too. So the education, whatever is allowed to be read even, is controlled by the school. So anyways, deliberate dumbing down of America, very interesting, heroic, bright lady. And what this all says is, get your kids out of the public schools if you can. Best thing is homeschool, but if you can't get homeschool, then private religious school would be best. If you can't get private religious school, private secular school. Religion helps for teaching kids values and morals and all that other stuff. So anyways, it's a fascinating book. It's a real good book.